I can smell when my wife is about to start her period before she even knows, and when she tried to prove me wrong, I exposed something she never expected. Let me start by saying that my wife, 42F, and I, 33M, have been together for a long time. We've built a solid, loving relationship, one that's healthy, supportive, and filled with mutual respect. We laugh together, we share interests, and honestly, I couldn't ask for a better partner. But over the last few years, I've noticed something unusual. I developed the uncanny ability to smell when she's about to start her period, before she even realizes it herself. At first, I brushed it off, thinking maybe it was just a weird coincidence. You know, one of those random things your brain convinces you of when you're too observant for your own good. But then it kept happening, every single month. Without fail. A day or two before her period would start, I'd catch this faint, discreet scent. It wasn't anything unpleasant, just something different. A subtle, metallic, slightly acidic tang that seemed to settle at the back of my nose. Now, my wife has always had unpredictable cycles. Sometimes it arrives late, other times it sneaks up a week early. There was never any pattern to it. But I could predict it every time like clockwork. I finally brought it up in conversation, expecting her to find it interesting or maybe even impressive. But instead, she laughed. She thought I was just imagining things or getting lucky with my guesses. So, I challenged her. I told her, next time, I'll tell you before you even realize it. She agreed, probably thinking I'd get it wrong and we'd have a good laugh about it. But guess what? A few weeks later, I casually mentioned over dinner, I think it's about that time. She rolled her eyes, but sure enough, the very next day, she got her period. Still skeptical, she insisted it had to be coincidence. So I kept doing it. Month after month, I'd point it out before she even felt a cramp or mood shift. Eventually, she couldn't deny it anymore. I was right every single time. She even tried to bluff me once, acting as if nothing was happening, but I called her out. And I was right again. Now, I know what you're probably thinking. Google it. And trust me, I have. Most sources claim it's related to vaginal smell, but I'm convinced it's something else. Maybe it's her sweat, or some hormonal change that releases a scent only I seem to pick up on. Whatever it is, I've developed this strange, almost superhuman sense just from being with my wife for so long. It's become our little inside joke now. She even asks me if I sense anything whenever she's feeling off. I never thought this would be a talent I'd develop in my 30s, but hey, life is full of surprises. And before you ask, yes, there's a bit of an age gap between us. 9 years, to be exact. It's something people notice, but to us, it's never been a big deal. We share so many interests and have such a strong connection that age is just a number in our world. So now, I have to ask, can anyone else relate to this? Or am I just walking around with a built-in period detector no one else seems to have? Update 1. After the first time I called it, my wife was convinced it was a one-time fluke. She chalked it up to coincidence, maybe even subconscious cues I was picking up on, like her mood shifts or little changes in her routine. But I knew better. It wasn't about how she acted, what she ate, or even how she felt. It was the smell. That same faint, metallic, slightly acidic scent I couldn't explain, but I knew was there. So, I made it my mission to keep proving it. And I did. Each month, like clockwork, I'd casually mention it. Hey, I think it's coming soon, I'd say while folding laundry or scrolling through my phone. She'd roll her eyes, sometimes laughing it off, other times giving me a skeptical side eye. But every single time, without fail, her period would start within 24 hours. No patterns, no apps, just my nose telling me what her own body hadn't even told her yet. At first, she thought I was watching her too closely, looking for signs. She insisted I was picking up on subtle behavior changes, like the way she craved chocolate or how she got a little snappier than usual. So she decided to test me. 1 month, she deliberately acted super chill. No mood swings, no cravings, nothing. She even put on her best "I'm totally fine" performance. And you know what? I still caught it. I called it before she even suspected a thing. That's when I saw it, the exact moment she realized I wasn't just guessing anymore. She stopped laughing it off after that. Instead, she got curious. She asked me questions, trying to understand what exactly I was smelling. I wish I had a better way to describe it, but it's just there. It's subtle, almost like the faintest trace of pennies in the air, mixed with something warm and slightly sour. It's not bad at all, just distinct. Naturally, we turned to Google, but everything we found pointed to the usual explanations: vaginal odor, hormonal changes, pheromones. But none of it quite matched what I was experiencing. I wasn't noticing anything obvious or unpleasant. It was deeper, something that felt like it belonged in the background, almost like a sixth sense I'd developed without realizing it. She even tried throwing me off by wearing extra perfume or changing up her hygiene routine, but none of it mattered. No matter what she did, I could still detect it. Eventually, it became this weird, hilarious superpower in our relationship. If we were out with friends and she mentioned feeling off, I'd casually lean over and go, "Yep, it's coming." It became a running joke between us, until she started relying on me to track her cycle better than any app could. The best part? She once jokingly asked me to predict it in front of her friends. I gave it a quick sniff, nodded confidently, and said, "Tomorrow." They laughed, thought I was messing around. The next day? Boom. Period. Her friends were horrified and fascinated all at once, and now she calls me her human period tracker. But the weirdest part is that it's not just with her anymore. I started noticing faint traces of it on other women, coworkers, women in crowded places. It's nowhere near as strong or clear as it is with my wife, but I can sometimes tell when someone's close to their time of the month. I don't mention it, obviously, because that would be beyond creepy, but it's definitely a thing. And let me tell you, knowing this and having to pretend I don't know is an awkward experience I never thought I'd have in life. Despite all this, I still have no scientific explanation. I've tried looking into how long-term exposure to someone's scent could heighten your senses, but there's barely any information beyond the basic pheromone stuff. I've read that some animals can sense hormonal shifts in humans, so maybe it's just an evolutionary leftover we don't talk about much. Whatever it is, it's become a strange little quirk in our relationship, one that's oddly brought us closer. Who knew that sniffing out her cycle would become part of our routine? She jokes that if I ever lose this gift, she'll have to start marking it on the calendar like a peasant again. Now, I'm just wondering, am I the only one with this weird superpower, or are there others out there quietly smelling things they can't explain? Update 2. So, after my last update, things took a bit of a weird turn. What started as a quirky inside joke between my wife and me has somehow evolved into something bigger, more complicated, and honestly, a little unsettling. It all started when my wife, now fully convinced of my gift, decided to put it to the ultimate test. One night, we were watching TV, and out of nowhere, she asked, "Can you tell if I'm ovulating too?" I laughed it off at first, but she was dead serious. She wanted to know if this ability of mine extended beyond just predicting her period. And here's the thing, I could. It wasn't the same smell as before, but there was something different about her scent during those weeks in between. It had this sort of sweeter, almost floral edge to it. Again, not unpleasant, just noticeable. I casually mentioned it, not expecting much, but she immediately grabbed her phone and checked her cycle app. Sure enough, it lined up perfectly with her ovulation window. That's when things got weird. She got a little obsessed with it. I'd catch her randomly coming up to me, hair damp from the shower, asking, "Smell anything?" Like I was some kind of human hormone detector. It was funny at first, but then it started happening a lot. She began relying on my senses more than her actual tracking app, and honestly, that's way too much responsibility for one nose to handle. But the wildest part? I started picking it up on other women again. I mentioned in my last update that I sometimes noticed faint traces of the same scent on others, but now? It's like my brain knows what to look for, and once I'm aware of it, it's everywhere. At work, at the gym, even standing in line at the grocery store. And let me be very clear, I'm not actively sniffing people, I promise I'm not a creep, but it's like my brain just automatically registers it. There was one awkward moment when I was in a meeting with my boss and halfway through, it hit me. I had to sit there, nodding along to her presentation, while internally screaming, "Oh God, not now. Don't think about it." I felt like some kind of hormonal bloodhound against my will. I told my wife about it, hoping she'd laugh it off, but instead, she found it hilarious. She immediately dubbed me the ovulation oracle and suggested I start charging for my services. Yeah. No, thanks. But it wasn't just a joke anymore. A couple of weeks later, we were out with friends, and somehow the topic of tracking cycles came up. My wife, bless her heart, couldn't resist telling them about my gift. Cue the skepticism, the disbelief, and of course, the inevitable challenge. One of her friends jokingly asked, "All right, genius, when am I due?" I was put on the spot, and I really didn't want to participate. But after some lighthearted teasing, I caved and gave my honest guess based on what I was picking up. The next morning? A text from my wife's friend saying, "Okay, WTF. You were right. I wish I could say that was the end of it, but nope." Word spread within our circle, and suddenly, people were side-eyeing me at social gatherings, wondering if I could secretly tell when their time was coming. One friend jokingly told me I should quit my job and work for an ovulation tracking company. Thanks, but no thanks. At this point, I was seriously considering just keeping my mouth shut about the whole thing, because the last thing I need is to become the unofficial period psychic of my social group. Then something happened that made me question whether this whole thing was even normal anymore. A couple of days ago, I woke up in the middle of the night because I smelled it. That same familiar scent, but my wife was fast asleep next to me. Confused and half asleep, I brushed it off. But then, the next morning, she mentioned that she felt cramps starting. I hadn't even been awake properly, but somehow, my nose still knew before she did. It's getting to the point where I can't turn it off. I can smell it even when I don't want to smell it. And it's not just my wife anymore. Random scents in public places are starting to trigger that same gut feeling, even when I try to ignore it. I have no idea if this is some weird brain trick or if my body has actually developed some hypersensitive hormone detection system. I've done more digging online, and honestly, the information out there is lacking. Most articles talk about pheromones and subconscious cues, but nothing really explains why this ability seems to be getting stronger. The few Reddit threads I found have people saying they've experienced similar things with partners, but no one seems to have an explanation beyond, "You're just really in tune with them." That might be true, but being too in tune is starting to feel like a curse. My wife still thinks it's cool, though. She's convinced I have some kind of evolutionary advantage, and she's even joked about testing me in a blind smell test. Imagine me sitting there, sniffing shirts like a dog at the airport. Yeah, not happening. So, where do I go from here? I have no clue. I'm debating whether I should see a specialist about it or just accept that I'm doomed to forever be aware of the hormonal fluctuations of every woman within a 10-foot radius. One thing's for sure, next time my wife tries to prank me by faking it, she won't stand a chance. And to anyone out there who can relate, how the hell do you turn this off? Because I could really use a break. Update 3. Alright, so it's been a while since my last update, and I figured it was time to wrap things up. A lot has happened since I first realized I could smell my wife's period before she even knew it was coming. What started as a quirky party trick has slowly turned into something that, honestly, I never expected to be dealing with on a daily basis. Let me just say, this superpower isn't all it's cracked up to be. For one, it's not something I can just turn off. No matter how much I try to ignore it, it's like my brain is hardwired to recognize that specific scent, and once I pick it up, I can't unsmell it. Imagine walking through life with an internal alert system you never signed up for. It's exhausting. At first, my wife thought it was hilarious. She'd randomly walk into a room and ask, "Anything yet?" Like I was some kind of biological calendar. But as the months went by, the novelty started wearing off for both of us. The problem is, she still relies on it, sometimes more than she should. If I tell her I don't smell anything, she assumes she's in the clear, which, well, biology doesn't always work that way. She learned that the hard way. And then there's the social aspect. I thought keeping this ability within our circle of friends was manageable, but I underestimated just how much people love a good weird story. Word got around, and now, even casual acquaintances will jokingly ask if I can sense anything when we're hanging out. It's all in good fun, for them, but for me? It's just uncomfortable. I've perfected the art of laughing it off and changing the subject, but I swear I can feel people wondering every time they're around me. One particularly awkward moment happened at work. I was in the break room with a few coworkers when someone made a joke about their time of the month. I kept my mouth shut, but inside, I was screaming because I knew exactly who was due soon. I never realized how much I could know about someone without meaning to, and it's really made me hyper-aware of boundaries I didn't even know I needed to set. At this point, I've learned a few coping mechanisms to make it more manageable. First, I've stopped focusing on it. If I actively try to smell it, I swear it gets stronger. So now, I do my best to distract myself and just go about my day without thinking too much about it. It's kind of like tuning out background noise. You know it's there, but you don't let it take over your thoughts. Second, I've set some rules with my wife. No more testing me, no more relying on me as a substitute for her actual tracking methods, and absolutely no turning it into a party trick at social gatherings. She agreed, reluctantly, but I think she realizes now that it's not as fun for me as it is for her. One of the strangest realizations I've had through all of this is just how much our bodies communicate things without us even realizing it. The fact that I've been able to pick up on this just by being around her for so long is kind of mind-blowing. It makes me wonder what else we unconsciously pick up from our partners over time, subtle things we might not even recognize as signals. For those who were curious, no, I haven't gone to a doctor about it. Mostly because I'm not sure what I'd even say. "Hey doc, I can smell my wife's hormones better than an app?" Yeah, not exactly an easy conversation to have. Plus, I've done enough Googling to know that the science around pheromones and scent sensitivity is still pretty murky. So where does that leave me now? I've come to accept that this weird little talent isn't going away anytime soon, but I'm learning to live with it. It's no longer something I bring up casually or joke about, and I do my best to ignore it when I'm out in public. And honestly, I'm hoping that with time, my brain will just tune it out naturally. If there's one takeaway from all of this, it's that relationships are weird, bodies are weirder, and sometimes you develop random skills you never asked for. Anyway, thanks for following along with this strange journey. I think I'll retire my superpower here and go back to being a normal husband, one who doesn't accidentally predict his wife's cycle with alarming accuracy. At least, that's the plan.